New all-time highs yet again in the market. We opened up above the 6360 level on the S&P 500 this morning, traded all the way up to the 6380 level before rolling over at the end of the day, closing at 6363. So ultimately, we were only up 0.07% on the day. And early on this morning, we actually saw quite a bit of positive zero DTE GEX. This is a screenshot we posted in Discord about 20 minutes after the open. You can see all the zero DTE gamma exposure basically between 6370 and all the way up to the 6400. So right at the open, we were seeing a strongly positive skew with potential up to the 6385 level. That was the largest gamma exposure concentration basically up until around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so we actually took a trade right out of the gate, selling 5 of the 6380, 6375 put credit spreads for $2.65. We kept really tight stops on this, and ultimately we exited for a $375 loss. But as the market found support, we actually re-entered, and I posted to our members, I was like, don't kill me, but we're selling again the same 6380, 6375, that's actually a typo, 6375 put credit spreads at $3. So we re-entered, the look was the same, the market was finding some support. We're keeping tight stops below the opening lows and basically looking for a move up into this 6380 to 6385 zone. And so it was just shortly thereafter that we actually exited the position, closing that out at $1.75 as the market was approaching 6380. So a really quick scalp on the day, just lasted a couple of hours. Zooming out here to our daily candlestick chart and looking at our total gamma exposure time frame, the largest gamma exposure is at the 6400 strike. We've been talking about that over the last several trading sessions, and basically 6400, 6500, and a little bit at 6600 starting to pop up there. So there still is positive skew in the market, but we remain cautious up here, even though we are taking scalps intraday, and we still are adding long positions in our portfolios, which we'll talk a little bit more about later in the video. But we are remaining cautious, maintaining hedges and diversifiers in our portfolio. You hear us talk about that in a lot of our YouTube videos. In the case that we do see a market pullback, we really haven't seen a substantial pullback here over the last 3 months. But in the case that one does materialize, we want to be able to protect our existing positions and get exposure to a big downside move if that does take place. So we basically buy cheap put debit spreads and other put ratio type spreads in order to have basically inexpensive exposure in case the market does get a little nasty dip, and we can profit on any kind of dip, maybe into the 50-day EMA, which is currently sitting just above the 6,000 level. So hedging and diversification remains key, but we're still adding new positions and locking in gains as the market continues higher.
Thanks, Anthony. Definitely an active day for us in terms of trading. And the environment itself has been quite challenging compared to a lot of the environments that we've traded over the last couple of years. So definitely keeps us on our toes. And in our live stream today, I was bringing up IWM as a possibly interesting trade on the long side if we were to see price drop to the 224 area or high 223 area, because that marks this whole moving average currently at 223.60. In Discord, when we brought up the trade, we were about 1.5 points away from the low of RTY at that point. I chose to trade RTY futures instead of IWM. So, picked up 10 contracts of RTY at 2268.20. The bottom was 2266.6. So there you go. But we ended up bouncing to the close to the mid 2270s. So that was a good trade. Ended up locking in $1,100 on that. And I wasn't too concerned with what happened thereafter because I was simply betting on the initial reaction off of that whole moving average. So if we flip back to today's close and what that means for tomorrow, it's amazing. All of these days combined together, and we're still looking at an indecisive picture where IWM continues to flirt with this line at the whole moving average. With the Keltners pointing sharply up and this big GEX cluster at 230, I am biased to think that we ultimately reach 230. We'll keep an eye on this. Next few days could be challenging as we continue to get closer to the large caps reporting earnings. So we'll keep updating with what we're seeing.
Thanks, Sean. Next, let's take a look at AMD, a mover and a shaker, including today up 2.19%, closing at 162.12. You can see the gamma exposure continues to remain strong at higher strikes on AMD, all the way up to the 170 strike. We're seeing gamma exposure growing. Same thing when we look at the volume in the options market, from 160 to 170, strong volume coming in today as well as in previous days. And you can see this move off of the April lows has really been quite impressive. We're starting to get pretty stretched here above the 50-day EMA, sitting at 134.12, so way below where price is currently trading, but it is rising quickly. And we actually took a day trade on AMD this morning right out of the gate. We bought 3 July 25th AMD 160 165 call debit spreads at $1.65. And let's just take a look at what the trade setup looked like when we entered the position. Gamma exposure was strong. Even on a weekly standpoint, this is our weekly filter to just look at the contracts that are expiring this coming Friday on AMD. So we're seeing large gamma exposure between the 160 to 165 strikes. AMD at the time was trading at 160.25 and looking like a potential breakout. You can see we highlighted this resistance that had formed over the last few days. Buyers were stepping in and we were about to break above this near-term resistance. So like I mentioned, this was a quick scalp. We exited just a short time later, locking in $321 on those call debit spreads, well over a 50% return on our risk. So coming back over to our main chart, it does look like AMD is reaching a potential resistance zone between 162 and 165. So we could see some potential dealer selling pressure as price progresses higher towards that 165 mark. We do have our eye, however, on the 170 strike. If we continue to see volume coming in tomorrow and Monday at that 170 strike, there could be a continuation move to go. So we're going to have to monitor this day by day. But as of right now, it does look like AMD's got a little bit of room up to 165 before we start seeing really increased selling pressure kick in.
Thanks, Anthony. Despite the market continuing to reach new highs, we still see some quality companies that haven't quite yet participated, and that's where I'm looking for opportunities on the long side. So that brings up Walmart, WMT. It's been in a pretty long consolidation since the initial rebound off of the April lows. So basically since early May. I notice we're currently just above the whole moving average at 95. And we still have positive GEX. We still have option volume, mostly at higher strikes. And we have this big GEX cluster at 100. And also I'm looking at this 105. And so there's the possibility that if we start to see some sort of weakness or consolidation in the S&P and the NASDAQ, you might have some of these laggards that are quality companies, play catch up, somewhere between 5 and 10% that I think is possible between now and 3 weeks from now.
Thanks, Sean. Let's take a look at Palantir real quick. Basically a flat day today, up 0.15%, closing just below the 155 level. But this 155 level appears to be a key near-term resistance point. You can see we've hit this level and rejected 2 times in the prior weeks. And we've hit it again just today and basically consolidating right at 155. It does look poised to potentially break out. Big volume in the options market at that strike, and we see gamma exposure is pretty strong up into the 160 level. So I think come tomorrow morning, we'll see where Palantir opens up. If there is a potential breakout, we could see a move potentially into the 155 to 157.5 zone. So somewhere in this range right here. And if we just change our gamma exposure filter to the weekly setup, you can see it almost looks exactly the same. Basically, market participants are positioned for a move tomorrow, and then thereafter, we'll see there could be some resetting of positioning into next week. So that's something we'll also have to monitor closely. But in terms of a tactical trade, this is something that we're going to be looking at the open tomorrow. We'll be discussing this in our community Discord. Link in the description below if you guys want to check that out. And we are running a limited time promotion, $300 off our yearly portfolio manager tier subscription. Use code SUMMER20 $8.25 at checkout to get that special. We've got a few spots remaining, but we will be ending this discount soon, so take advantage of it while you can. Our members get access to our gamma exposure dashboard, our option flow analytics tools, as well as our algorithmic trading strategies. And like I mentioned earlier, members also get access to the premium channels in our Discord community. You can track our trades in real time and see all the moves we're making in our options portfolios. Links in the description below for you guys to check all of that out. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.